The rain was falling hard on the streets of Manhattan. Sarah Martinez stood outside La Bellezza restaurant, taking a deep breath before going inside. She was already 15 minutes late for her shift. Her bus had broken down 3 blocks away, and she had to run all the way in the pouring rain. Her uniform was slightly damp and her shoes made soft squeaking sounds on the pavement. Sarah pushed open the heavy glass door and stepped into the warm, golden light of the restaurant. The smell of fresh bread and expensive wine filled the air. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, casting sparkles across the white tablecloths. Soft classical music played from hidden speakers. This was the kind of place where people spent more on one meal than Sarah made in a week. "You're late," manager Robert Davis said sharply as soon as he saw her. He was a thin man with gray hair and a permanent frown. He always wore the same black suit and red tie. "I'm sorry, Mr. Davis, the bus broke down and I had to run here." "It won't happen again," Sarah said quietly, trying to catch her breath. Mr. Davis looked at her wet shoes and sighed. "Just get to work. Table 7 needs water and Table 12 has been waiting for their check. Move quickly. We have important guests tonight." Sarah nodded and hurried to the back room where the waiters kept their things. She put her old backpack in her locker and checked her appearance in the small mirror. Her long dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun. Her white shirt and black pants were clean and pressed, even if they were a bit worn. At 24 years old, Sarah looked tired. Dark circles sat under her brown eyes. She hadn't slept well in months. She grabbed a water pitcher and went back to the dining room. La Bellezza was almost full tonight. Rich people in expensive clothes sat at every table. Men wore suits that probably cost thousands of dollars. Women wore dresses covered in jewelry that sparkled under the lights. They laughed and talked, drinking wine that cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. Sarah moved between the tables carefully, filling water glasses and taking orders. She smiled politely at every customer, even when they didn't look at her or say thank you. After 4 years of working here, she was used to being invisible. To most of these people, she was just part of the furniture. In the center of the dining room sat the restaurant's most beautiful piece. It was a grand piano, black and shining like a mirror. The wood was so polished that Sarah could see the chandelier reflected in it. The piano had been there for as long as the restaurant had been open, sitting on a small raised platform. But no one ever played it. It was just for show, Mr. Davis always said, just to make the restaurant look more elegant. Sarah had walked past that piano hundreds of times. She tried not to look at it too much. It made her heart hurt in a way she couldn't explain. "Waitress, we need more bread," a woman in a purple dress called out, snapping her fingers. Sarah turned quickly and went to get fresh bread from the kitchen. The kitchen was hot and loud. Pots clanged together. The chef shouted orders at his cooks. Sarah grabbed a basket of warm bread and returned to the dining room. As she moved through the crowded room, she heard Mr. Davis speaking in his special voice, the voice he only used for very important customers. Sarah glanced over and saw him standing next to table 15, the best table in the restaurant. It was right by the window with a perfect view of the city lights. A man sat at the table with 3 other people. The man looked to be in his early 50s. He had silver hair combed perfectly back from his face. His suit was dark blue and looked like it was made just for him. A gold watch glinted on his wrist. Even from across the room, Sarah could tell he was someone important. Someone with power. Someone with money. "Mr. Blackwell, it is such an honor to have you here tonight," Mr. Davis was saying, practically bowing. "Please, if there is anything at all that you need, anything at all, you just let us know. Marcus Blackwell." Sarah had heard that name before. He owned some big technology company. She had seen his face on the news once or twice. He was famous for being rich. Very, very rich. Billionaire rich. The wine list. Marcus said without looking at Mr. Davis. His voice was cold and flat. "And make sure the food is actually hot this time. Last time I was here, my pasta was barely warm." "Of course, Mr. Blackwell." "Right away." Mr. Davis practically ran to get the wine list. Sarah continued with her work. She brought bread to table 9. She cleared plates from table 6. She smiled and nodded and said right away and my pleasure so many times the word stopped meaning anything. The night got busier. More people came in. The dining room filled with the sound of conversations and laughter, and the clinking of glasses. Sarah's feet hurt. She had been wearing the same cheap shoes for 2 years and they were falling apart. But new shoes cost money. Money she didn't have. Every dollar Sarah made went to important things. Rent for the small apartment she shared with her two younger siblings. Food, bills, school supplies for her brother and sister, medicine for her sister's asthma. There was never anything left over for things like new shoes or a better coat or a day off. Their mother had died 2 years ago. Cancer. It had been fast and terrible. One day she was fine, and 6 months later she was gone. Their father had left when Sarah was 7. She didn't even remember what he looked like anymore. So now Sarah was responsible for everything. Her brother Miguel was 16 and in high school. Her sister Rosa was 13. Sarah worked 2 jobs to keep them fed and housed. During the day, she worked at a coffee shop. At night, she worked here at La Bellezza. She usually got home around midnight, slept for 5 hours, then got up and did it all again. Some nights, when she was very tired, Sarah let herself remember what her life used to be like, before her father left, before money got tight, before her mother got sick. She remembered piano lessons every Tuesday and Thursday. She remembered her teacher, Mrs. Chen, a kind older woman who said Sarah had real talent. She remembered practicing for hours, losing herself in the music. She remembered the way the piano keys felt under her fingers, smooth and cool. She remembered being happy. But that was a long time ago. The piano in their old house had been sold to pay medical bills. Sarah hadn't played in over a year. Sometimes her fingers would move on their own, playing invisible keys on the edge of a table or on her lap during her bus ride. But it wasn't the same. Sarah, Table 12 needs their dessert, Mr. Davis called out. Sarah shook her head, pushing the memories away. She didn't have time for remembering. She had work to do. She went to the kitchen and picked up 2 plates of tiramisu. The desserts looked perfect with cocoa powder dusted on top in a pretty pattern. She carried them carefully back through the dining room. Table 12 was close to the piano. As Sarah approached with the desserts, she saw that one of the customers had dropped her napkin on the floor. Sarah would need to get her a new one. She set down the desserts and smiled at the customers. "Enjoy your dessert. I'll be right back with a fresh napkin for you, ma'am." Sarah turned to go back to the kitchen, but as she turned, her hip bumped against the edge of a chair. Someone had pushed it out without her noticing. Sarah stumbled slightly, trying to catch her balance. Her hand reached out automatically, looking for something to steady herself. Her fingers touched the piano, just barely. Just for a second, but it was enough. A single note rang out, clear and pure and beautiful. The sound filled the dining room, hanging in the air for a long moment before fading away. Sarah froze. Her hand was still on the piano key. The note was still echoing in her ears. For one brief second, she forgot where she was. She forgot about the restaurant and the customers and her aching feet. She just heard the music. Then reality came crashing back. "What do you think you're doing?" The voice was loud and angry. It cut through the dining room like a knife. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Marcus Blackwell was standing at his table. His face was red. His eyes were fixed on Sarah like she had just committed a terrible crime. Sarah pulled her hand back from the piano as if it had burned her. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Didn't mean to?" Marcus's voice got even louder. He started walking toward her, his expensive shoes clicking hard on the floor. "You didn't mean to put your dirty hands on a priceless instrument?" "I just stumbled, sir. I barely touched." "I don't care what you did or didn't mean to do." Marcus was standing right in front of her now. He was tall and Sarah had to look up at him. His face was twisted with anger. "Do you have any idea how much that piano is worth? Do you have any idea what you could have damaged?" Sarah felt her face getting hot. Everyone in the restaurant was staring at her. She could feel dozens of eyes on her back. "I'm very sorry, sir. It was an accident. I didn't hurt the piano." "You don't know that." Marcus turned to look at Mr. Davis, who had rushed over. "Is this how you train your staff? To go around touching things they have no business touching? Things that cost more than they'll make in their entire lives?" Mr. Davis looked terrified. His face had gone pale. "Mr. Blackwell, I am so sorry. This is completely unacceptable." "Sarah, apologize to Mr. Blackwell right now." "I already apologized," Sarah said quietly. She could feel tears starting to form in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not cry in front of these people. "An apology isn't enough," Marcus said. He crossed his arms over his chest. "People like her need to learn their place. She should know better than to touch things she can't afford to replace. What if she had broken something? What if she had scratched the wood? Does she have insurance? Can she pay for damages? I'll speak to her, Mr. Blackwell, I assure you." Mr. Davis started. You'll do more than speak to her, Marcus interrupted. She should be fired immediately. This is completely unprofessional. I come to this restaurant because it's supposed to have standards, but clearly those standards are slipping. Sarah's heart stopped. Fired? She couldn't lose this job. She needed this job. The money from the coffee shop alone wasn't enough to pay for everything. Without La Bellezza, she would lose the apartment. Her siblings would have nowhere to live. Please, Sarah heard herself say. Please, sir, I'm very sorry. It won't happen again. I really need this job. Marcus looked at her with cold eyes. You should have thought about that before you touched something that doesn't belong to you. Maybe this will teach you to be more careful, to know your place. Some of the other customers were watching with uncomfortable expressions. A few were whispering to each other. But no one said anything. No one told Marcus to stop. No one defended Sarah. Mr. Davis pulled Sarah aside, his hand tight on her arm. Go to the back room, he whispered harshly. Go now. I'll deal with this. Sarah felt numb as she walked toward the kitchen. Her legs felt like they were moving on their own. Behind her, she could hear Mr. Davis apologizing over and over to Marcus. She could hear Marcus saying something about the help these days and no respect for quality. She pushed through the kitchen doors. The noise and heat hit her, but she barely noticed. She kept walking until she reached the small back room where the staff kept their things. Then she sat down on the old wooden bench and put her face in her hands. She couldn't cry. If she started crying, she might not stop. How could one small accident turn into this? How could touching a piano for 1 second cause so much trouble? It wasn't fair. None of this was fair. Sarah thought about her brother and sister at home. They were probably doing homework right now or watching TV or arguing about whose turn it was to do the dishes. They had no idea that their whole life might be about to fall apart. Again, she thought about her mother. What would she think if she could see Sarah now, sitting in a back room, probably about to lose her job, all because some rich man decided to make a big scene? Her mother had always told her to be strong, to keep going no matter what, to take care of Miguel and Rosa no matter what it cost. Sarah had tried. She had tried so hard. But sometimes it felt like the world was determined to knock her down no matter what she did. The door to the back room opened. Sarah looked up, expecting to see Mr. Davis coming to fire her. But instead, she saw Carmen, another waitress who had worked at La Bellezza for 10 years. Are you okay? Carmen asked softly. She was a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and graying hair. I don't know, Sarah admitted. Is Mr. Davis going to fire me? I don't know, honey. That man out there is being terrible. I've never seen anyone act like that over nothing. Carmen sat down next to Sarah on the bench. You barely touched the piano. You didn't hurt anything. It doesn't matter, Sarah said. He's important. Mr. Davis cares more about keeping him happy than keeping me employed. Maybe, Carmen said. But maybe not. Just wait and see. They sat in silence for a moment. From the dining room, Sarah could hear the normal sounds of the restaurant starting up again. Conversations, laughter, the clinking of silverware on plates, like nothing had happened. Like Sarah's whole world hadn't just been turned upside down. She took a deep breath and stood up. I should get back out there. Are you sure? Carmen asked. I have to. Even if I'm about to get fired, I should at least finish my shift with dignity. Carmen smiled sadly. You're stronger than you know, Sarah. Sarah wasn't sure about that, but she squared her shoulders and walked back toward the dining room anyway. She had to keep going. For Miguel, for Rosa, for her mother's memory, she had to keep going. Sarah walked back into the dining room with her head held high. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, but she kept her face calm. She had learned over the years how to hide her feelings, how to smile when she wanted to cry, how to keep going when she wanted to give up. Mr. Davis was still at Marcus Blackwell's table. He was pouring wine and nodding at everything Marcus said. Sarah could see him laughing at Marcus's jokes, even though nothing Marcus said was funny. It made her stomach turn. She picked up her water pitcher and started making rounds to the other tables. Maybe if she just did her job perfectly for the rest of the night, Mr. Davis would forget about firing her. Maybe if she was invisible enough, this would all blow over. But she could feel Marcus watching her. Every time she moved past his table, she felt his cold eyes following her. It made her skin crawl. Sarah refilled water glasses at table 8. An older couple smiled at her kindly. "Thank you, dear," the woman said. "You're welcome," Sarah replied softly, grateful for the kindness. "That was quite a scene earlier," the man said quietly. "That fellow made a mountain out of a molehill, if you ask me. You barely touched the piano." "Thank you, sir," Sarah said. It helped a little, knowing that someone had noticed how unfair it all was. She moved to the next table. A young family with 2 small children. The little girl had spilled her juice and Sarah cleaned it up without being asked. The mother looked exhausted and grateful. Sarah knew that feeling. "Can we have more bread, please?" the father asked. "Of course, right away," Sarah said. She headed toward the kitchen, but Marcus's voice stopped her in her tracks. "You know what I think?" Marcus said loudly. He wasn't talking to Sarah, but he was talking about her. His voice carried across the whole dining room. "I think this restaurant has gotten careless. When you let in just anyone to work here, standards drop. They start thinking they can touch anything they want, do anything they want." Sarah kept walking. "Don't react," she told herself. "Just ignore him. I mean, look at her," Marcus continued. "Does she even know how to do her job properly? She's clumsy. She's careless. And now she's just wandering around like nothing happened." Sarah pushed through the kitchen doors. Her hands were shaking. She set down the water pitcher and took a deep breath. The chef, a large man named Tony, who had always been nice to her, looked over. "You okay, Sarah?" he asked. "I'm fine," she lied. "That guy is a real piece of work," Tony said, shaking his head. "Don't let him get to you." But how could she not let it get to her? Marcus Blackwell was out there in front of everyone talking about her like she was nothing. Like she was stupid. Like she was worthless. Sarah grabbed a basket of bread and went back out. She delivered it to the family at table 9 and forced herself to smile. The little boy grinned at her, showing his missing front teeth. It made her think of Rosa at that age. She was heading back to check on her other tables when Marcus spoke again. This time, he was talking directly to Mr. Davis, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "You know, Robert, I've been coming to this restaurant for 5 years," Marcus said. "I've brought clients here. I've recommended it to friends. But I have to say, tonight has been very disappointing." "I am so sorry, Mr. Blackwell," Mr. Davis said quickly. "Please let me comp your entire meal. And your wine. Everything is on the house tonight." "It's not about the money," Marcus said, waving his hand dismissively. "I have plenty of money. It's about respect. It's about knowing that when I come to a place like this, I'm getting quality. Quality food, quality service, quality staff." Sarah felt her face burning. She knew exactly what he was implying. That she wasn't quality. That she didn't belong here. A woman at table 10 tried to get Sarah's attention. "Excuse me, miss. Could we get our check, please?" "Of course," Sarah said, pulling out her order pad with shaking hands, but Marcus wasn't done. He turned in his chair to look directly at Sarah. "Tell me something," he called out. "How long have you worked here?" Sarah froze. Every person in the restaurant was looking at her. The whole room had gone quiet again. "4 years, sir," she said quietly. "4 years," Marcus repeated. "And in those 4 years, has anyone ever told you not to touch the piano?" "The piano is just for decoration, sir." "I know that. I wasn't trying to play it. I lost my balance and—" "Excuses," Marcus interrupted. "People who can't take responsibility always have excuses. You touched something you shouldn't have touched. Just admit it." "I have admitted it, sir. I apologized. It was an accident." Marcus laughed, but it wasn't a friendly laugh. It was mean. "An accident? Everything is always an accident with people like you. People like you." The words hung in the air. Sarah knew exactly what he meant. Poor people. People who had to work for a living. People who weren't born into money and privilege. People like her. "I really am sorry," Sarah said one more time. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Sorry doesn't fix anything," Marcus said. He turned to his dinner companions. 2 men and a woman in expensive business suits. "This is exactly what I was talking about earlier. The service industry is going downhill. No one takes pride in their work anymore. No one understands professionalism." One of the men at Marcus's table looked uncomfortable. "Marcus, maybe we should just let it go." "She said she's sorry. Let it go?" Marcus turned on the man. "James, this is why your company is struggling. You're too soft. You let people get away with mediocrity. If this girl worked for me, she'd have been fired the second she touched that piano." James went quiet and looked down at his plate. Sarah felt sorry for him. Even Marcus's friends were afraid of him. Mr. Davis appeared at Sarah's elbow. "Sarah, why don't you take your break now?" he said quietly. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order. "But I haven't finished." "Now, Sarah." Sarah walked toward the back room again. She could feel tears starting to well up in her eyes. "Not here," she told herself. "Don't cry here. Wait until you get home. Wait until you're alone." But as she reached the door to the kitchen, Marcus's voice rang out one more time. "You see?" he said loudly. "She can't even handle a simple conversation without falling apart. This is what happens when restaurants hire people who aren't cut out for this kind of work. They're too sensitive, too emotional, too unprofessional." That was it. That was the moment something inside Sarah broke. Not in a big way, not in an obvious way, but in a small, quiet way that hurt worse than anything Marcus had said before. She had worked so hard. For years she had worked 2 jobs, barely slept, gave up everything for her siblings. She showed up on time. She did her work well. She smiled at rude customers. She cleaned up messes. She did everything that was asked of her and more, and for what? So some rich man could stand in a restaurant and call her unprofessional? So he could humiliate her in front of dozens of people? So he could make her feel small and worthless and stupid? Sarah turned around. She didn't plan to. She just did. Marcus was leaning back in his chair, looking pleased with himself. He had made his point. He had put the poor little waitress in her place. He was probably feeling very powerful right now. Sarah walked back toward his table. Mr. Davis's eyes went wide. "Sarah, no," he started to say, but Sarah wasn't going to make a scene. She wasn't going to yell or curse or throw anything. She was just going to say what she needed to say. "Mr. Blackwell," she said calmly, "I have apologized to you multiple times. I have explained that it was an accident. I barely touched the piano. I didn't damage it. I didn't scratch it. I didn't hurt it in any way. But you have decided to spend your entire evening making me feel terrible about an honest mistake." Marcus's eyebrows went up. He clearly wasn't used to being talked back to. Sarah continued. "I work hard at this job. I show up on time. I do my work well. I treat customers with respect. All I did was brush against a piano key while trying to keep my balance. That's it. But you have called me clumsy, careless, unprofessional, emotional, and mediocre. You have suggested I should be fired. You have mocked me in front of everyone here. I was simply making a point about standards," Marcus started. "No," Sarah said firmly. "You were being cruel. There's a difference between having standards and being cruel to someone who made a tiny mistake. And the saddest part is, you have so much money and so much power that no one in this room will tell you that what you're doing is wrong." The restaurant was completely silent. Mr. Davis looked like he might faint. Marcus's face had turned red again, but this time it was a different kind of red. This time he looked angry in a dangerous way. "How dare you speak to me like that?" Marcus said in a low, threatening voice. "Do you know who I am?" "Yes, sir. You're a billionaire. You own a technology company. You're very important and very powerful." Sarah's voice didn't shake. "But none of that gives you the right to be cruel to people who have done nothing wrong. You touched my piano," Marcus shouted. "It's not your piano," Sarah shouted back. Then she stopped, horrified at herself. She had yelled at a customer. That was definitely a firing offense, but now that she had started, she couldn't seem to stop. "It's the restaurant's piano, and I barely touched it. 1 key, 1 single note. That's all, and you have spent 20 minutes humiliating me over it, making me feel worthless, making me feel like I deserve to lose my job over an accident that hurt absolutely nothing and no one." Marcus stood up. He was tall and intimidating, and he looked down at Sarah with cold fury in his eyes. "You're right about one thing. You do deserve to lose your job, not because you touched the piano, but because you're disrespectful and argumentative and clearly incapable of knowing your place." "My place," Sarah repeated. "You keep saying that, my place." "What exactly is my place, Mr. Blackwell?" "Not here," Marcus said simply. "Not in a restaurant like this. Not serving people like me. You belong in some dirty diner somewhere, serving truck drivers and construction workers. Not in an establishment like La Bellezza." Sarah felt like she had been slapped. The cruelty in his words took her breath away. She had known Marcus was mean, but this was something else. This was pure contempt. This was him looking at her and seeing something less than human. Mr. Davis finally found his voice. "Sarah, you're fired. Get your things and leave. Now." Sarah had known it was coming, but hearing the word still hurt. "Mr. Davis, please." No, Mr. Davis said. You've caused enough trouble tonight. I can't have employees who argue with customers. Especially not customers like Mr. Blackwell. You're done here. Sarah looked around the restaurant. All those people sitting in their expensive clothes watching her like she was some kind of entertainment. And not one of them had said anything to defend her. Not one of them had told Marcus to stop being cruel. Well, almost not one of them. In the far corner of the restaurant, at a small table that Sarah hadn't even noticed before, an elderly woman was standing up. She was tall and thin, with white hair pulled back in an elegant bun. She wore a simple black dress and a pearl necklace. She had been sitting so quietly that Sarah hadn't even realized she was there. The woman started walking across the restaurant. Her movements were slow and deliberate, like she had all the time in the world. Everyone turned to watch her. Even Marcus looked confused. She walked right up to the piano. Then she turned to face Marcus. "Young man," she said. Her voice was soft but clear. "You've made quite a spectacle tonight." "And you are?" Marcus asked rudely. The woman ignored his question. Instead, she turned to look at the piano. She ran her hand gently along the top of it, almost like she was petting a beloved cat. "This piano hasn't been played in 3 years," she said. "Did you know that?" "What does that have to do with anything?" Marcus demanded. "Everything," the woman said simply. She turned to Mr. Davis. "Robert, how long have I been coming to your restaurant?" Mr. Davis looked surprised to be addressed. About 5 years, Mrs. Chen. You come every Tuesday evening." Mrs. Chen. The name stirred something in Sarah's memory, but she couldn't quite place it. 5 years, Mrs. Chen repeated. "And in those 5 years I have sat in my corner and I have watched. I've watched you treat some customers like royalty and others like servants. I've watched you put that beautiful piano on display like a trophy, but never let anyone touch it, never let anyone play it, never let it be what it was meant to be." "With all due respect, Mrs. Chen," Mr. Davis said nervously, "I don't see what—" "You claim to care about this piano," Mrs. Chen interrupted, still looking at Marcus. "You say it's priceless. You say it needs to be protected. But you don't even know if it still works properly, do you? When was the last time it was tuned? When was the last time anyone played it? When was the last time it made music instead of just sitting here looking pretty?" Marcus crossed his arms. "That's not the point. The point is that she—" He jabbed a finger at Sarah. "Had no right to touch it. And you," Mrs. Chen said softly, "have no right to be cruel." She turned to look at Sarah for the first time. Her eyes were dark and sharp, but there was kindness in them too. "Young lady, what is your name?" "Sarah Martinez, ma'am," Sarah said quietly. "Sarah," Mrs. Chen repeated. "Tell me, Sarah, do you play piano?" Sarah hesitated. She could feel everyone watching her again, waiting for her answer. I used to, ma'am, a long time ago." "How long ago?" "I stopped about a year ago. I had to. There wasn't time anymore, and we had to sell our piano." Mrs. Chen nodded slowly. "And before you stopped, how long had you been playing?" 15 years, Sarah admitted. "Since I was 9 years old." A ripple went through the restaurant. People whispered to each other. Even Marcus looked surprised. Mrs. Chen smiled. It was a small smile, but warm. 15 years, she said. "That's quite a long time. You must have been quite dedicated." Sarah felt tears pricking her eyes again. She had been dedicated. She had loved playing. It had been the one thing that was just hers, the one thing that made her happy when everything else was hard. "Mrs. Chen, I appreciate what you're trying to do," Mr. Davis said nervously. "But this really doesn't change anything. Sarah was out of line tonight and—" "Oh, I think it changes everything," Mrs. Chen said calmly. She turned to face the whole restaurant now, addressing everyone. "This young woman has been humiliated tonight. She's been called names. She's been threatened with losing her livelihood, and why? Because she accidentally touched a piano while trying to do her job. She should have been more careful," Marcus said. Mrs. Chen looked at him with something like pity. "Tell me, Mr. Blackwell, can you play piano?" "What? No, what does that have to do with anything?" "Everything," Mrs. Chen said again. "You claim this piano is priceless. You claim to know its value, but you don't really know anything about it, do you? You just know it's expensive. You just know it's supposed to be important, but you've never touched its keys. You've never heard what it can do. You have no idea what it's capable of." She turned back to Sarah. "But I think you do. Don't you, Sarah?" Sarah didn't know what to say. Where was this going? What did this kind old woman want from her? Mrs. Chen gestured to the piano bench. Please, she said. Sit down. Show us what you know. The whole restaurant seemed to gasp at once. Sarah stared at Mrs. Chen. For a moment she thought she had heard wrong. Sit down, play the piano. Here, now? In front of all these people? I can't, Sarah stammered. I haven't played in over a year. I'm not good enough anymore. Oh, I think you are, Mrs. Chen said gently. But more importantly, I think you need to do this. For yourself. Mrs. Chen, really, this is inappropriate, Mr. Davis said, stepping forward. His face was sweating. We can't just let the staff use the piano. It's for display purposes only. And besides, Sarah has been fired. She needs to leave. Then unfired her for 5 minutes, Mrs. Chen said calmly. Let her play. What's the worst that could happen? She plays badly? She makes some noise? I think we've all heard enough noise tonight already, haven't we? She looked pointedly at Marcus. Marcus's face was still red. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here and watch some waitress pretend to be a pianist. I came here for a nice dinner, not some circus show. Then leave, Mrs. Chen said simply. Marcus looked shocked. Excuse me? If you don't want to stay, then leave. No one is forcing you to be here. Mrs. Chen's voice was still soft, still polite, but there was steel underneath it. You've already gotten what you wanted. You've humiliated this young woman. You've shown everyone here how powerful and important you are. You've made your point. So if you're not interested in staying, the door is right there. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. He looked around the restaurant, clearly expecting someone to back him up. But no one said anything. People were watching with interest now, waiting to see what would happen next. I'm not leaving, Marcus finally said. He sat back down in his chair heavily. But this is absurd. Completely absurd. Mrs. Chen turned back to Sarah. My dear, I know you're frightened. I know you think you've forgotten how to play. But I promise you, music like yours doesn't just disappear. It's still inside you. It's been waiting for you. How do you know? Sarah asked. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. How do you know what kind of music I have? Mrs. Chen smiled. Because I know your mother. Sarah felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. What? Your mother was Elena Martinez, wasn't she? Elena Chen Martinez before she married. Sarah's eyes went wide. You know my mother? But how? Elena was my goddaughter, Mrs. Chen said softly. Her mother and I were best friends for 40 years. I watched Elena grow up. I taught her piano from the time she was 6 years old. And when she had a daughter of her own, she brought you to me for lessons. Suddenly, Sarah's vague memory became clear. Mrs. Chen, the piano teacher from when she was young. The kind woman with the patient smile who had taught her scales and arpeggios. She had been so young then, and Mrs. Chen had seemed ancient, but it was the same person. Those same kind eyes, I remember, Sarah whispered. You taught me how to play for Elise. You said I had gentle hands. I said you had gifted hands, Mrs. Chen corrected gently. And I meant it. You were one of the most naturally talented students I ever taught, right up until your father left and your mother couldn't afford lessons anymore. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face now. She didn't even try to stop them. You knew my mother was sick? I knew, Mrs. Chen said sadly. Elena was stubborn. She didn't want my help. She didn't want charity. She tried to handle everything on her own. By the time I found out how bad things were, it was too late. She was already in the hospital. She never told me she knew you, Sarah said. She probably didn't want you to feel obligated. Elena was proud. She wanted you to make your own way. Mrs. Chen reached out and gently took Sarah's hand. But I've been looking for you for 2 years. I knew Elena had a daughter working somewhere in the city. I knew she had children who needed help. But I didn't know where to find you. Elena's pride kept so many secrets. You've been looking for me? Sarah couldn't believe what she was hearing. Every Tuesday I come to a different restaurant in Manhattan. I've been to dozens of them over the past 2 years, hoping to find Elena's daughter. Tonight, when you touched that piano and that one note rang out, I knew it was you. No one else would touch a piano with such gentleness, such respect, even by accident. Sarah was crying openly now. Around them, the restaurant was silent. Even Marcus had stopped talking. Everyone was listening to the strange, beautiful conversation between the old woman and the young waitress. I can't play in front of all these people, Sarah said. I'm not ready. I'll make mistakes. I'll embarrass myself even more than I already have. You've already been embarrassed, Mrs. Chen said. What more can they do to you? Besides, you're not playing for them. You're playing for yourself, for your mother, for all the music that's been locked inside you for the past year. Sarah looked at the piano. It was so beautiful, so perfect. She thought about all the times she had walked past it over the years, pretending it didn't matter that she couldn't play anymore, pretending she didn't miss it every single day. What if I'm not as good as I used to be? Sarah asked. Then you're not, Mrs. Chen said simply. But you'll still be better than you are now, which is someone who hasn't played at all. The only way to get back to where you were is to start again. Why not start here? Why not start now? Sarah looked around the restaurant. All those faces watching her. Some looked curious. Some looked skeptical. Marcus looked angry and dismissive, like he was just waiting for her to fail so he could mock her some more. But there were other faces too. The old couple who had been kind to her earlier were smiling encouragingly. The young mother with the 2 children was watching with interest. Even some of the kitchen staff had come out to see what was happening, and there in the corner Carmen was giving her a thumbs up. Sarah made a decision. Maybe it was a stupid decision. Maybe she would make a fool of herself. Maybe her hands wouldn't remember what to do. But she was already fired. She had already been humiliated. What did she have to lose? Okay, Sarah said quietly. I'll play. Mrs. Chen's face lit up with the most beautiful smile Sarah had ever seen. Good. That's good, my dear. Mr. Davis stepped forward again. Mrs. Chen, I really must protest. The piano is very delicate, and if something happens to it, then I'll buy you a new one, Mrs. Chen said calmly. I promise you, Robert, nothing bad is going to happen to your piano. Now please step back and let the girl play. Something in the way she said it made Mr. Davis stop arguing. He stepped back, though he still looked nervous. Sarah walked slowly toward the piano. Her legs felt shaky. Her heart was beating so fast she thought everyone could probably hear it. She sat down on the bench and it felt both strange and familiar at the same time, like coming home after a very long trip. She looked down at the keys. They were beautiful, perfect, clean. She could see her own reflection in the polished black wood. Slowly, she lifted her hands and placed them on the keys. They were cool to the touch, smooth, perfect. She pressed down gently on middle C, and the note rang out clear and true. It was the most beautiful sound she had heard in a year. What are you going to play? Mrs. Chen asked. Sarah didn't even have to think about it. Rachmaninoff. Piano Concerto No. 2. The first movement. She heard someone gasp. Someone else whispered, That's one of the hardest pieces ever written. Marcus laughed loudly. Oh, this should be good. She's going to try to play Rachmaninoff. This waitress who hasn't touched a piano in a year is going to try to play one of the most difficult pieces in classical music. Please, by all means, go ahead and embarrass yourself further. Sarah ignored him. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Then another. And another. She thought about her mother. About the hours they had spent together at their old piano, before everything fell apart. About the way her mother would sit next to her and turn the pages of her music. About the way her mother would smile when Sarah got a difficult passage right. She thought about all the lessons with Mrs. Chen back when she was just a little girl. About learning to love music before she even understood what music was. She thought about the past year, all the pain, all the struggle, all the times she had wanted to give up but kept going anyway. All for Miguel and Rosa, all for her family. And she thought about tonight. About Marcus and his cruelty. About Mr. Davis and his cowardice. About all the people who had sat and watched her be humiliated and said nothing. This was her moment. Not theirs. Hers. Sarah opened her eyes. Her hands were steady now. She positioned her fingers on the keys, finding the opening chord. She could feel the music inside her waiting to come out. It had been waiting for so long. Marcus called out one more time, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Go ahead, sweetheart. Show us what you've got. Let's see this amazing talent you supposedly have. Let's see if you're anything more than a clumsy waitress who doesn't know her place. Sarah looked at him. Really looked at him. This angry, cruel man who thought his money made him better than everyone else. Who thought he could treat people however he wanted because he was rich and they were not. She smiled. A real smile. You wanted to know the value of this piano, she said. Let me show you. And then she began to play. The opening chords of Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 filled the restaurant like a wave. The sound was huge, powerful, overwhelming. It seemed impossible that one person could make so much music. It seemed impossible that so much emotion could come from just 88 keys. But it did. Sarah's fingers flew across the keyboard. The first movement of Rachmaninoff's Second Piano Concerto is one of the most technically demanding pieces ever written. It requires absolute precision. It requires incredible hand strength. It requires passion and control at the same time. It requires the kind of skill that takes years and years to develop. And Sarah had that skill. Her year away from the piano didn't matter. Her cheap clothes didn't matter. Her tired eyes and worn shoes didn't matter. When she played, none of that existed. There was only the music. The dark, brooding chords of the opening gave way to the sweeping melody. Sarah's hands danced across the keys, playing notes so fast they blurred together. Her fingers knew exactly where to go. Her hands remembered everything her brain thought it had forgotten. Around her, the restaurant had gone completely silent. No one was eating. No one was drinking. No one was even breathing, it seemed. They were all frozen, listening. Marcus's face had changed. The anger was gone. The smugness was gone. He was staring at Sarah like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Like she had suddenly transformed into someone completely different. Because that's exactly what had happened. The scared, tired waitress was gone. In her place was a musician. A real musician. Someone who understood music in a way that most people never would. The melody built and built, getting louder and more passionate. Sarah's whole body moved with the music. She leaned into the dramatic chords. She pulled back for the gentle passages. Her eyes were closed again, but she didn't need to see. Her hands knew the way. Mr. Davis was standing with his mouth open. The other staff members had all stopped working. They stood in the doorways, watching this impossible thing that was happening. In the corner, Mrs. Chen was crying. Happy tears. Proud tears. She was watching Sarah like a mother watches her daughter graduate or get married, or do something wonderful and important. Sarah played through the first movement without a single mistake. Not one. Her fingers hit every note perfectly. Every trill was clean. Every run was precise. It was like the past year hadn't happened. It was like she had been practicing every day. But she hadn't been practicing. She had been working. She had been surviving. She had been sacrificing everything, including her music, to take care of her family. And now the music was pouring out of her like it had been waiting, building up pressure, ready to explode. The piece moved into the quiet middle section. The mood changed from dark and passionate to gentle and sad. Sarah played the melody so softly, so tenderly that people had to lean forward to hear it. It was the sound of heartbreak. The sound of loss. The sound of someone who has suffered and survived. A few people in the restaurant started crying. They couldn't help it. The music was too beautiful. Too real, too honest. Sarah's own tears were falling now, landing on the piano keys. But she didn't stop playing. She played through the sadness. She played through the pain. She played through everything that had hurt her this year, and all the years before. And slowly the music began to build again. The sadness gave way to determination. The gentle notes became stronger, more powerful, more defiant. This was the section where the piece says, I have suffered, but I will survive. I have been knocked down, but I will get back up. I am stronger than you think. Sarah played these notes like they were her own personal anthem. She played them for every time Marcus had made her feel small. She played them for every time she had wanted to give up but didn't. She played them for her mother, who had fought cancer with everything she had. She played them for Miguel and Rosa, who deserved a better life. The music got louder and faster. Sarah's hands were moving so quickly they were almost a blur. The chords were huge now, filling the entire restaurant. The piano seemed to shake with the power of it all. And then, with one final dramatic chord, it was over. Sarah played the last note and let it ring out. The sound hung in the air, fading slowly until finally there was silence. Complete silence. Sarah sat at the piano, her hands still on the keys, breathing hard. She didn't move. She couldn't move. She had just poured every bit of herself into that music, and now she felt empty. Exhausted. Complete. The silence stretched on. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. 4. 5. Sarah still sat at the piano, her chest rising and falling as she caught her breath. She was afraid to look up. Afraid to see the faces watching her. Afraid that maybe it hadn't been as good as she thought. Afraid that everyone was just sitting there in shocked horror at how badly she had played. But then someone started clapping. It was the old man from table 8. He was standing up, his hands coming together in slow, deliberate applause. His face was wet with tears. Then his wife stood up and started clapping too. Then the young mother with the 2 children. Then Carmen from the kitchen. Then Tony the chef. Then the family at table 9. Then the couple at table 6. Within seconds, everyone in the restaurant was standing. Everyone was clapping. The sound of applause filled the room like thunder. It got louder and louder and louder until it seemed like the walls themselves were shaking. Sarah finally looked up. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. All these people, these rich people in their expensive clothes, were standing up for her music. Some of them were crying. Some of them were smiling. Some of them looked absolutely stunned, like they had just witnessed a miracle. "Brava!" someone shouted. "Brava!" More people took up the cry. "Brava! Brava!" Sarah stood up from the piano bench on shaky legs. She didn't know what to do. She had never received applause before. She had played in recitals when she was younger, but nothing like this. Nothing even close to this. Mrs. Chen was making her way through the tables toward Sarah. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling the biggest smile Sarah had ever seen. When she reached Sarah, she pulled her into a tight hug. "That was extraordinary," Mrs. Chen whispered in her ear. "Your mother would have been so proud." "I am so proud." Sarah hugged her back. This woman who had been her mother's teacher and friend. This woman who had been looking for her for 2 years. This woman who had just given her the greatest gift anyone could give, a chance to play again. The applause continued. It seemed like it would never stop. People were whistling now, cheering. Sarah saw Mr. Davis standing near the kitchen, looking absolutely shocked. His mouth was hanging open. He clearly had no idea what to do, but there was one person who wasn't clapping. Marcus Blackwell was still sitting at his table. His hands were flat on the tablecloth. His face had gone pale. He looked like someone had just punched him in the stomach. The 3 people who had been dining with him were all standing and applauding. The man named James was clapping the hardest with a huge grin on his face. But Marcus just sat there frozen. Slowly, the applause began to die down. People sat back down in their seats, but the energy in the room had completely changed. Everyone was talking excitedly. Everyone was looking at Sarah with new eyes. Mrs. Chen kept one arm around Sarah's shoulders. She turned to address the room. "Thank you all for witnessing something very special tonight," she said. Her voice was soft, but somehow it carried through the whole restaurant. What you just heard was the sound of pure talent. The kind of talent that can't be taught or bought or faked. The kind of talent that comes from years of dedication and love and sacrifice. She looked at Marcus. Earlier tonight, there was some discussion about value, about standards, about knowing one's place. I think we've all learned something tonight about real value, about real worth. It doesn't come from money. It doesn't come from power. It comes from here. She placed her hand over her heart. And it comes from here. She tapped her head. And it comes from years of work that most people will never see. Marcus was still sitting, still silent. His face was red now, but it was a different kind of red than before. This wasn't anger. This was shame. "Mr. Blackwell," Mrs. Chen said directly to him, "you spoke a great deal tonight about this young woman not knowing her place. You called her clumsy, careless, unprofessional. You suggested she should be fired for barely touching this piano. You said she belongs in a dirty diner serving truck drivers, not in a nice restaurant serving people like you." The restaurant had gone quiet again. Everyone was listening. "But I wonder," Mrs. Chen continued, "what is her place? Is it serving you dinner? Or is it at Juilliard, studying with the best teachers in the world? Is it working double shifts to support her family? Or is it performing in concert halls to thousands of people? Is it being humiliated by a man who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing? Or is it being celebrated for the extraordinary gift she has?" Marcus opened his mouth, but no words came out. "You judged her by her uniform," Mrs. Chen said. "By her worn shoes. By the fact that she works as a waitress. But you never bothered to ask who she really is, what she's capable of, what she's been through, what she sacrificed. You just saw someone you thought was beneath you and you treated her accordingly." "I didn't know," Marcus started to say. "No," Mrs. Chen interrupted. "You didn't know, and you didn't care to know. That's the problem. You made up your mind about her the second you saw her, and when she made one tiny innocent mistake, you used it as an excuse to be cruel. Sarah watched this elderly woman stand up to one of the most powerful men in New York. Mrs. Chen wasn't yelling. She wasn't being mean. She was just telling the truth calmly and clearly, and somehow that was more powerful than any amount of shouting could be. "I made a mistake," Marcus said quietly. "I overreacted." "Yes," Mrs. Chen agreed. "You did. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Marcus finally stood up. He looked at Sarah. For the first time that night, he really looked at her. Not at a waitress. Not at a poor person. Not at someone beneath him. He looked at her like she was a real person. "I apologize," he said. His voice was stiff, uncomfortable. "I was out of line. I said things that were inappropriate and hurtful. I'm sorry. It wasn't a great apology. It wasn't even a particularly good apology. But it was something." Sarah nodded. "Thank you," she said simply. "Your playing was—" Marcus struggled to find the words. "It was incredible. I've been to dozens of classical concerts, professional concerts with world-famous pianists. And what you just did was as good as any of them. Better than most of them." "Thank you," Sarah said again. Marcus sat back down heavily. He looked tired suddenly. Old, like the fight had gone out of him. His dinner companions were looking at him with expressions that ranged from disappointment to disgust. The woman who had been sitting next to him picked up her purse and stood up. "I think I'm going to leave, Marcus," she said coldly. "I've seen enough tonight." "Margaret, wait," Marcus started. But Margaret was already walking away. She stopped at Sarah's side. "That was beautiful," she said. "You have a real gift." Then she walked out of the restaurant. James and the other man exchanged looks. "We should probably go too," James said. "We'll talk to you later, Marcus." They left as well, leaving Marcus sitting alone at the table that had been meant for 4 people. He looked down at his plate. His expensive dinner sat there, barely touched. Suddenly, it didn't seem so appetizing. Mr. Davis appeared at Mrs. Chen's elbow. "Mrs. Chen, I want to apologize for the disruption tonight. I assure you—" "Robert," Mrs. Chen said, turning to him. "Don't apologize to me. Apologize to Sarah." Mr. Davis looked uncomfortable. "Sarah, I may have been hasty earlier when I said you were fired." "May have been?" Mrs. Chen's eyebrow went up. "I was hasty," Mr. Davis corrected. "Sarah, you're not fired. In fact, if you want to come back to work, you're welcome to. With a raise." Sarah almost laughed. An hour ago, she had been fired, humiliated, made to feel worthless, and now she was being offered her job back with a raise. The whole situation was surreal. "Thank you, Mr. Davis," Sarah said. "But I don't think I want to work here anymore." Mr. Davis's face fell. "I understand. I truly am sorry for how I handled things tonight." Sarah believed him. He did look sorry. But that didn't change what had happened. It didn't change the fact that he had been willing to fire her to please an important customer. It didn't change the fact that he had cared more about money and status than about what was right. Mrs. Chen squeezed Sarah's shoulder. "My dear, why don't you come sit with me? We have a great deal to talk about." Sarah followed Mrs. Chen to her table in the corner. It was a small table set for 1. There was a half-eaten meal there and a glass of red wine. Mrs. Chen had been in the middle of her dinner when all of this started. They sat down together. Around them, the restaurant was slowly returning to normal. People went back to their meals and their conversations, but everything felt different now. The atmosphere had changed. The piano in the center of the room didn't look like a decoration anymore. It looked like an instrument, a real instrument that had just created real music. "How did you find me?" Sarah asked. "You said you'd been looking for 2 years." "I knew Elena had a daughter who was working in the city," Mrs. Chen explained. "I knew you were supporting your siblings. But I didn't know where. Elena was always so private, so proud. She didn't like to accept help." "She never told me she knew you," Sarah said. "I mean, I remember my piano lessons when I was little, but I didn't know you were her godmother. I didn't know you'd been looking for me." "Your mother wanted you to make your own way," Mrs. Chen said.
She was afraid that if she told you about our connection, you would feel obligated.
"She wanted you to be independent, to be strong. She wanted you to succeed on your own merits, not because of connections or charity." "But we needed help," Sarah said. Her voice broke a little. "We needed help so badly." "I know, dear. And that's why I've been looking for you. I made a promise to your mother, you see. Years ago, before she got sick, before things got bad, she made me promise that if anything ever happened to her, I would look after you. All of you," She made me promise to make sure you were okay. She never told me, Sarah whispered. She probably didn't want to worry you, Mrs. Chen said gently. Elena always tried to protect you from things. Even at the end in the hospital, she was more worried about you and your siblings than she was about herself. Sarah's eyes filled with tears again. I miss her so much. I know you do. Mrs. Chen reached across the table and took Sarah's hand. But she would be so proud of you. The way you've taken care of your family, the way you've worked so hard, the way you've sacrificed your own dreams to make sure Miguel and Rosa are okay. That takes incredible strength and love. It doesn't feel strong, Sarah admitted. Most days I just feel tired. Strength doesn't always feel strong, Mrs. Chen said. Sometimes it just feels like putting one foot in front of the other. Like getting up every morning even when you want to stay in bed. Like doing what needs to be done even when it's hard. That's what real strength is. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Around them, the sounds of the restaurant continued. Dishes clinking. Conversations humming. Life going on. What happens now? Sarah asked. Mrs. Chen smiled. Now we talk about your future. Your real future. Not waitressing. Not working yourself to death. Your future as a pianist. I can't afford music school, Sarah said immediately. I can barely afford rent. Sarah, Mrs. Chen said gently. I'm not just any piano teacher. I'm not just your mother's godmother. I'm the director of the Chen Foundation for Musical Arts. Do you know what that is? Sarah shook her head. It's a foundation that provides full scholarships to talented musicians who can't afford traditional music education. We pay for everything. Tuition, housing, food, books, everything. And we provide a stipend for living expenses. Sarah's heart started beating faster. Are you saying... I'm saying I want to offer you a full scholarship to Juilliard, Mrs. Chen said. Starting next semester. Full ride, everything paid for, plus a stipend that will be enough to support your siblings. Sarah couldn't breathe. Juilliard, the best music school in the country, maybe in the world. She had dreamed about going there when she was younger, but she had given up that dream years ago. It was impossible, too expensive, too far out of reach. I can't, Sarah heard herself say. I have to work. I have to take care of Miguel and Rosa. The stipend will cover that, Mrs. Chen said. It's specifically designed for students who are supporting families. You'll have enough to rent an apartment near campus, enough to feed and clothe your siblings, enough to pay for everything you need. You won't have to work. You can just study, just play, just be the musician you were always meant to be. Why? Sarah asked. Why would you do this for me? Because I promised your mother, Mrs. Chen said simply. Because you have extraordinary talent that deserves to be nurtured. Because the world needs your music, and because, she paused, her eyes getting misty again, because watching you play tonight reminded me why I fell in love with music in the first place. You don't just play notes, Sarah, you play emotions. You play truth. You play your soul. That's rare. That's precious. That's worth protecting and cultivating. Sarah didn't know what to say. Her mind was spinning. Juilliard, a full scholarship, money to support her family, the chance to play music again, really play every day. It was everything she had ever wanted, everything she had given up hoping for. I don't know if I'm good enough, Sarah said quietly. Mrs. Chen laughed. My dear, you just played Rachmaninoff perfectly after not touching a piano for a year. You're good enough. Trust me on that. Sarah looked around the restaurant. She saw Marcus still sitting alone at his table, looking small and defeated. She saw Mr. Davis hovering nervously, probably worried about losing Mrs. Chen as a customer. She saw the other diners watching her with new respect. And she saw the piano, still sitting there in the center of the room. The piano that had started all of this. Sarah sat with Mrs. Chen for another hour. They talked about everything. About her mother, about the past 2 years, about Miguel and Rosa, about music and dreams and the future. Mrs. Chen explained how the scholarship would work. Sarah would start at Juilliard in January, just a few months away. The foundation would pay for everything. Tuition, housing, books, a piano for her to practice on. The stipend would be deposited into her account every month. It was enough to cover rent on a 2-bedroom apartment near campus, food for all 3 of them, and all their other expenses. You won't be rich, Mrs. Chen said, but you won't have to work yourself to exhaustion anymore either. You can focus on your music, on your studies. on being young and talented and alive. Sarah still couldn't quite believe it was real. What if I'm not good enough? What if I get to Juilliard and I can't keep up with the other students? Then you practice until you can, Mrs. Chen said firmly. Sarah, you have the talent. You proved that tonight. What you need now is training, refinement, the chance to develop your gift properly. That's what Juilliard will give you. When do I have to give you an answer? Sarah asked. Mrs. Chen smiled. The scholarship is yours whenever you're ready to accept it. But I hope you'll say yes soon. You've wasted enough time serving overpriced pasta to ungrateful people. Sarah laughed. It felt good to laugh after everything that had happened tonight. Can I have a few days to think about it? I need to talk to Miguel and Rosa. Make sure they're okay with this. Of course, Mrs. Chen said. Take all the time you need. But Sarah? She reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Don't let fear stop you from accepting this. I know it's scary. I know it seems too good to be true. But you deserve this. Your mother would want this for you. Sarah nodded, feeling tears prick her eyes again. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you so much. They exchanged phone numbers and email addresses. Mrs. Chen insisted on calling Sarah a cab and paying for it. You've had a long night, she said kindly. Go home, get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow. Sarah hugged her goodbye. It was a long hug, tight and warm. When they finally pulled apart, Sarah felt different somehow. Lighter. Like a weight she'd been carrying for years had finally been lifted. As Sarah gathered her things from the back room, Carmen found her. Girl, that was amazing, Carmen said, pulling her into a hug. I had no idea you could play like that. Neither did I, Sarah admitted. I mean, I knew I used to be able to play, but I didn't know if I still could. Well, you can, Carmen said firmly, and you better take that scholarship. Don't you dare keep working at this place when you could be at Juilliard. Sarah smiled. I'm thinking about it. Don't think too long, Carmen warned. Opportunities like this don't come around often. Sarah said goodbye to Carmen and a few of the other staff members who had seen her play. They all congratulated her and wished her luck. Even Mr. Davis approached her nervously. Sarah, I really am sorry about earlier, he said. I should have defended you. I should have stood up to Mr. Blackwell. I was wrong. It's okay, Mr. Davis, Sarah said, and surprisingly, she meant it. She wasn't angry anymore. She just felt tired and overwhelmed and strangely peaceful all at once. If you ever need a reference for anything, I'll give you a glowing one, Mr. Davis offered. Thank you, Sarah said. I appreciate that. As she was leaving through the front door of the restaurant, someone called her name. She turned around to see Marcus Blackwell standing up from his table. He walked toward her slowly, like he wasn't sure if she would wait for him or just leave. Sarah waited. Marcus stopped a few feet away from her. He looked uncomfortable, awkward. Nothing like the confident, cruel man who had yelled at her a few hours ago. I wanted to apologize again, he said, properly this time. What I did tonight was inexcusable. I was rude, I was cruel, and I was completely out of line. You didn't deserve any of that. No, I didn't, Sarah agreed quietly. Marcus winced. I've been thinking about what Mrs. Chen said, about judging you by your uniform, by your job. She was right. I saw what I expected to see instead of looking at who you really are. Why did you do it? Sarah asked. Why were you so mean to me over something so small? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was tired. Because I could. Because I'm used to people doing what I say. Because I was having a bad day and I took it out on someone I thought couldn't fight back. He looked down at his expensive shoes. That's not an excuse. It's just the truth. You hurt me, Sarah said. You made me feel worthless. You almost made me lose my job. All because I accidentally touched a piano. I know, Marcus said. And I'm sorry. Really, truly sorry. I can't take back what I said or what I did. But I want you to know that I learned something tonight. About respect. About humility. About the fact that money and power don't make someone better than anyone else. Sarah studied his face. He looked sincere. Ashamed. Human for the first time that night. I forgive you, she said finally. Marcus looked surprised. Just like that? Just like that, Sarah confirmed. I don't want to carry around anger and resentment. I have too many other things to think about now. Too many good things. So yes, I forgive you. I hope you learn from this. I hope you're kinder to people in the future. I will be, Marcus said. I promise. He hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, your playing was the most beautiful thing I've heard in years. You have an extraordinary gift. Thank you, Sarah said. They stood there for another moment, this unlikely pair, the billionaire and the waitress. Then Marcus nodded and went back to his table. Sarah turned and walked out of La Bellezza for the last time. The cab ride home felt like a dream. Sarah stared out the window at the lights of the city, her mind racing with everything that had happened. A few hours ago, she had been just another exhausted waitress trying to make it through another shift. Now she had a full scholarship to Juilliard waiting for her. Her whole life had changed in one evening. When she got to her apartment, it was almost midnight. She unlocked the door as quietly as she could, not wanting to wake Miguel and Rosa, but the lights were still on in the living room. Miguel was sprawled on the couch, doing homework. Rosa was sitting at the table, drawing something in her sketchbook. They both looked up when Sarah came in. "You're home early," Miguel said, surprised. "Sarah usually didn't get back until after midnight." "Yeah," Sarah said. "Something happened tonight." Rosa perked up. "What happened? Are you okay?" Sarah sat down on the couch and told them everything. The whole story from beginning to end. Touching the piano, Marcus yelling at her, getting fired, Mrs. Chen revealing who she was, playing Rachmaninoff. The scholarship offer. Miguel and Rosa listened with wide eyes, interrupting occasionally to ask questions or gasp at particularly dramatic parts. When Sarah finished, they both just stared at her. "So," Sarah said, "what do you think?" "What do we think?" Miguel repeated. "Sarah, this is amazing. This is like winning the lottery." "You have to accept," Rosa said firmly. "You have to go to Juilliard." "But it would mean big changes," Sarah warned. "We'd have to move to a new apartment. You'd have to change schools. Everything would be different." "Different good," Rosa said. "Different better. Sarah, you've been taking care of us for 2 years. You've worked so hard. You've given up everything for us. Now it's your turn." "You deserve this." "She's right," Miguel agreed. "We'll be fine. We're not little kids anymore. We can handle a new apartment and new schools. And besides, you said the money would be enough, right?" "We wouldn't be struggling anymore." "Right," Sarah confirmed. "We'd have enough for rent and food and everything we need." "Then what are you even thinking about?" Miguel demanded. "Say yes. Go to Juilliard. Be a famous pianist. Live your dream." Sarah laughed, feeling tears in her eyes again. "Are you sure?" "Really sure?" "Really sure," Rosa said. She got up and hugged Sarah tight. "Mom would want you to do this." "You know she would." Sarah hugged her sister back, feeling a rush of love and gratitude. Miguel joined the hug, and they all sat there on the couch wrapped around each other. "Okay," Sarah said softly. "I'll do it. I'll accept the scholarship." Rosa and Miguel cheered. They stayed up late talking about what the new apartment might look like, what Juilliard would be like, what kinds of music Sarah would learn to play. It felt like the first time in 2 years that they had talked about the future with excitement instead of dread. The next morning, Sarah called Mrs. Chen and accepted the scholarship. Mrs. Chen was thrilled. She invited Sarah to come to her office later that week to sign the paperwork and start the process of enrolling at Juilliard. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Sarah gave notice at the coffee shop. She and Mrs. Chen found a perfect 2-bedroom apartment near the Juilliard campus. Sarah met with advisors and teachers at Juilliard, who were all impressed when they heard her play. Miguel and Rosa enrolled in their new schools and made new friends quickly. For the first time in years, Sarah had time. Time to practice piano for hours every day. Time to sleep 8 hours a night. Time to eat real meals instead of grabbing whatever was quick and cheap. Time to be young and to pursue her passion and to dream about the future. She thought about Marcus sometimes. She wondered if he had really learned anything from that night, or if he had just felt momentarily ashamed before going back to his usual ways. But then, 3 months after Sarah started at Juilliard, something interesting happened. She saw an article in the New York Times about Marcus Blackwell's company making a huge donation to a new charity. The charity was called the Music Education Initiative, and it provided free music lessons and instruments to underprivileged children in New York City. The article said that Marcus had started the charity anonymously, not wanting any publicity or credit, but somehow the news had leaked out. When asked about it, Marcus had simply said, "Every child deserves the chance to discover their talents regardless of their financial situation." Sarah smiled when she read that. Maybe he had learned something after all. 6 months after that night at La Bellezza, Sarah gave her first public performance at Juilliard. It was a student recital, nothing huge, but it was her first time playing in front of an audience since she was a teenager. Mrs. Chen was there, sitting in the front row. Miguel and Rosa were there too, dressed up and looking proud. Sarah had invited Mr. Davis and Carmen and some of the other staff from La Bellezza, and they had come to support her. She even invited Marcus. She didn't think he would come, but she sent him an invitation anyway. He came. Sarah saw him slip into the back row just before the recital started. He was dressed simply, in a regular suit instead of his usual expensive designer clothes. He sat quietly and listened. Sarah played Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 again, the same piece she had played that night at the restaurant. But this time it was different. This time she wasn't playing out of desperation or defiance. She was playing out of joy, out of love for the music, out of gratitude for the second chance she'd been given. When she finished, the audience erupted in applause. Sarah stood and bowed, her heart full. She looked out at all the faces watching her. Mrs. Chen crying happy tears. Miguel and Rosa grinning proudly. Carmen whistling and cheering. Mr. Davis clapping enthusiastically, and Marcus standing in the back applauding quietly with a small, genuine smile on his face. After the recital, people crowded around Sarah to congratulate her. Her teachers praised her performance. Other students complimented her technique. It was overwhelming and wonderful. When the crowd finally cleared, Marcus approached. "That was beautiful," he said simply. "Even better than the first time I heard you play." "Thank you for coming," Sarah said. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Marcus admitted. "I wasn't sure I'd be welcome. But I'm glad I came. I wanted to see you succeed, to see you in your element doing what you were meant to do." They talked for a few minutes. It was a brief, slightly awkward conversation, but it was friendly. Marcus congratulated her on her progress at Juilliard and wished her luck with her future career. Then he left, disappearing into the New York night. Sarah never saw him again, but sometimes she would see articles about his charity, about the hundreds of children who were learning to play piano or violin or cello because of his donations. She liked to think that in his own way, Marcus was trying to make amends, that he was trying to be better. 2 years later, Sarah graduated from Juilliard at the top of her class. She was immediately offered a position with a prestigious orchestra. Miguel was in college studying engineering. Rosa was thriving in high school and had discovered a talent for art. On the night of Sarah's first professional concert, she wore a simple black dress. Nothing fancy or expensive, just elegant and appropriate. Before she went on stage, she looked at a photo on her phone. It was an old picture of her mother, taken years ago when she was healthy and happy. "I did it, Mom," Sarah whispered to the photo. "We all did it. We made it through." Then she walked onto the stage. The concert hall was full. Hundreds of people had come to hear her play. The orchestra was tuned and ready. The conductor was waiting. Sarah sat at the piano, placed her hands on the keys and began to play. The music filled the hall, soaring and powerful and beautiful. Every note was perfect. Every emotion was real. Sarah lost herself in the music, the way she always did when she played. In the audience, Mrs. Chen sat with Miguel and Rosa, all three of them crying with pride. Somewhere in the city, Marcus Blackwell read about the concert in the newspaper and smiled. And in heaven, if such a place exists, Elena Martinez listened to her daughter's music and knew that everything had turned out exactly as it should. The story could have ended differently. Sarah could have left that restaurant broken and defeated. She could have given up on music forever. She could have let Marcus's cruelty define her. But instead, one moment of accidental contact with a piano had led to this, to a full life, to a career doing what she loved, to her siblings being cared for, to dreams coming true, because sometimes, just sometimes, the world works out the way it should. Sometimes the talented are recognized. Sometimes the cruel learn to be kind. Sometimes the struggling find help. Sometimes a single note on a piano can change everything. Years later, when Sarah was an established and famous pianist, she created her own foundation. It was called the Elena Martinez Foundation for Young Musicians. It provided scholarships, instruments, and lessons to talented children from low-income families. The foundation's motto was simple: talent has no price tag. And on the wall of the foundation's office, there hung a photograph. It showed a young woman playing a beautiful black piano in an elegant restaurant. her face filled with passion and determination. Under the photo was a small plaque that read, "Every life can change in a moment. Every person deserves a chance. Every song deserves to be heard." Sarah made sure that as many songs as possible were heard. She made sure that talent was nurtured, not ignored. She made sure that no young musician would have to give up their dreams because of money or circumstances, or the cruelty of people who thought they were better. And sometimes, late at night, when she sat at her piano in her beautiful apartment, Sarah would play that same Rachmaninoff piece. She would remember that night at La Bellezza. The fear, the humiliation, the moment when Mrs. Chen asked her to play, the feeling of her hands on the keys after so long away, the sound of applause. She would remember it all and she would be grateful, not for the cruelty she endured, but for the strength she discovered. Not for the pain, but for the perspective it gave her. Not for the struggle, but for the success that followed. Because in the end, that night hadn't been about Marcus Blackwell at all. It hadn't been about his money or his power or his cruelty. It had been about Sarah, about her music, about her mother's love and Mrs. Chen's kindness and her own determination to keep going, even when everything was hard. It had been about a moment when the whole world could have gone one way, but instead went another. A moment when silence fell and then transformed into the most beautiful sound. The sound of someone finding their way home,